I was raised by a great family. My dad was a business owner. My parents were married. They didn't use, never seen them use in my life. Just a normal middle class upbringing is what I had. And I started using them probably around 15 or 16 years old, and it took off really fast. And by the time I was 20, it was really out of control. And I met Carol when I was 21. We got married when I was 21. So uh, we're going to be celebrating 28 years of marriage in the next couple of months. Things were really bad for us. I had a pretty decent job, and I was able to maintain it somewhat for about 15 years. And, this disease is progressive, incurable, and fatal, and it just continued to progress, so quickly. And the devastating effects it had on my children as we were doing our best to raise our kids as best we could, being using addicts. And it was extremely difficult, and it got so bad that we could no longer raise them, so they ended up in foster care. And that was a couple years before we decided to get clean. They stayed in foster care a couple years, and we continued to use. It was so out of control. You know, Eventually, I just got to the point where I couldn't stand me anymore. I knew that something had to change, even if it meant losing everything. I was at the point where I was willing to give up my family and everything if it meant me getting clean. I was at that point. And it was hard for me to accept that, but I was there. I was like, this has got to stop, or I need to die. It was that dire. So that's whenever I decided to check into treatment. We only ate every couple days. We weren't even eating, and when we did eat, we live about 4 blocks away from a Salvation Army, and we would walk over to the Salvation Army to eat. And during this process, we got to know the director of the Salvation Army, really nice guy. And we were there eating lunch one day, and he asked me, Carol only weighed 85 pounds maybe. And he asked me what kind of cancer my wife had. And I said, she doesn't have cancer. And the next question was, are you on drugs? And I don't know what made me say that day, but I said yes. His next question was, do you want to live like that? And I said no. And he said, what can I do to help you? And I said, you could let me use your phone and try to call somewhere to get into residential treatment. And that's what he did, and that's what I did. And I ended up at Phoenix House in December of 2006.
Like I said, I didn't want to go. I just did not want to go. I was scared. I didn't want to be doing what I was doing anymore. Like, for about the week after we got the bed dates where we were waiting, it was the dead of winter. Like I said, we had no electricity, and it was freezing cold in our house. And we would sit together on a mattress on the floor, and we would wrap up in every piece of clothes, every blanket. I think we even had curtains, whatever we could find, and just huddle together, try not to freeze to death. And so Family Service had made us go to 12-step fellowship meetings, and we would try once in a while. And I guess one of us had grabbed pamphlets about addiction and stuff, and we would sit there, and we were so sick, like physically at this point, that it was hard to carry on with our addiction. Like, I couldn't hardly function to even leave the house to like go hustle and get money or just to do anything. And so we were sitting there, and I would read these pamphlets to him by candlelight. And we would just cry and cry and cry because we didn't know a way out. Like, we couldn't see this way out. And so anyway, the day came, and we made it, and I was awake, and he was taking me to treatment, and I begged him all the way to Columbia. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go. And he said, well, I'm going to treatment. Like, so what are you going to do? And so I'm thinking, how can I talk him out of this? And I remember we pulled in McCambridge Women's Center parking lot, and he said, here we are. And I said, I don't want to go in here, please. Let's go home. And he said, if we go home, we're going to die. And I said, I don't care. I said, I just want to go home. We can die together. And he said, why do you care? And he said, you have to get out of the car because I'm going to treatment. And I think he walked me in. I don't really, kind of blanked out after that because I was mad. I was used to getting my way, especially from him. And he wasn't giving it. You know, he likes to laugh and say, you're welcome. You're welcome. I saved your life. You know, and probably in a way he did. But really, it was a power much greater than either one of us that got me out of the car that day, that made me stay there that day. Yeah, it was a miracle. Miracles really do happen.
So I remember after being at Phoenix for a couple of weeks and them talking to me about sober living and Oxford houses and how that might be a good idea to look into. I remember talking to Carol on the phone and saying, I think I'm going to go to an Oxford house. And even though we owned our own house in Jeff City, I was willing to not go right back there because in my mind, if I went straight back home, that was my old life I was going to use again. So I was wanting to try something different. So I got into an Oxford house. Carol got into an Oxford house, and we stayed there for our first 6 months of recovery before we moved back home.
We went to our meetings and we did outpatient treatment, and you know, we did whatever we had to do to make sure that we didn't use again, that we started working on us as a couple and as individuals.
From what I can remember, I remember somebody just showing up on our doorstep with paperwork saying, here, you need to sign this, your kids are coming home.
Yeah.
It was just like that. It just seemed like it was dropped from the sky. So it was quite the miracle in our lives, you know.